Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to our first of many community discussions, Being Other. I want to thank first our sponsors, Peabody, JHAA Affinity, Hopkins at Home, and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. My name is Katrina Caldwell, and I currently serve as the Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer here at Hopkins University. I want to thank you for taking time out of what we know is a busy schedule after hopefully a great holiday weekend for many of you, to join us in what we hope will be the first of great conversation and dialogue around what does it mean to be other. In the 1903 book, The Souls of Black Folks, Du Bois described what he called the double consciousness as follows. It is a particular sensation, this double consciousness, the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on often with amused contempt, sometimes pity. One ever feels his two-ness, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideas in one body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. As we think about what Du Bois spoke about in 1903, at the turn of the century, this ideal of being both a part of and apart from the communities of which we serve, we live, we work. I want to thank those who are part of the conversation with me today. Before I introduce our panelists, however, I'd like to thank Vicki Snyder from Hopkins at Home, Elena Thompson with Affinity Engagement in the Office of Alumni Relations, and finally, Tony Lugo for his support for making us all look good tonight, and making sure that that the technical aspect of the program runs smoothly. Now, I want to introduce our panelists. First, join me in welcoming Ike Amakiri, who was a 2016 graduate of Arts and Sciences. He's currently an orthopedic surgery resident at Mass General Hospital and will be moving to Harvard University in the fall. Welcome, Ike. Next, we have Christina Smith, who's a 2000 graduate of the business school. She's a certified diversity professional, founder and owner of Diversity and Inclusion Strategies. And finally, Dr. Otis Brawley, professor of oncology, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and 39th Bloomberg Distinguished Professor. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having us.
To provide some context to our discussion, 2020 brought us more than a pandemic, and during this unprecedented time, many existing issues of inequity and identity and intersectionality have risen to the surface, for some in new ways, and for others for the first time. These discussions have been created to offer an opportunity to share experiences, to learn and share with one another, and to have frank, open, and respectful conversations with Johns Hopkins as our connection. Tonight, you will hear from our panelists about their experiences and reflections on the last year, and then we will take a short break before joining small breakout room discussions to connect directly with one another. So our first question tonight that I will first pose to Christina is, could you complete the following phrase and explain your response? Being Black in X means what to you?
So being Black in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging space is pretty extraordinary. And it's extraordinary because for many of us who have been trying to do this work for such a long time, it felt like pulling teeth to just have a conversation. And now people are standing in line. They want to have the conversation. And so for me, it's an extraordinary time. It's a magical time because I just feel like the people that I work with, we've been dying to have these conversations, literally dying to have these conversations. And so now it's here and it is happening.
Thank you. Mike, could you answer the same phrase, being Black in X means?
Yeah, I would say being Black in medical education. I just graduated from Dartmouth last Wednesday. I would say being Black in medical education means having to find balance in ways that your white counterparts don't necessarily have to. Um, whether that's balancing, the way you interact with your patients, the way you interact with your attendings, and how that might be different for you because of your own background, because of your own uniqueness. You have to balance those differences, and ultimately, once you find that balance, you'll be able to succeed in anything you do in medical education.
Thank you. Otis?
Well, I hear exactly what Ike is talking about, but I would say I would add being Black in medicine. You have a responsibility to try to bring other folks along with you and help develop other individuals in medicine. Maybe not necessarily doctors, but also in nursing and other medical professions, social work.
Thank you. So the conversation about literally dying, Christina, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that. Given the context that you discussed diversity, equity, the urgency, were there positive changes that you've seen this year?
I think back in the 1960s, when we watched demonstrations and marches, we saw Black and white people come together to march together. What happened this past year was unprecedented. We are really seeing people, young people, old people, and everyone in between, different races coming together. The LGBTQ community. I mean, people are really supporting one another, unlike anything I've ever seen before. And what was so interesting is there was a gentleman who was the president of the Fortune 500 company, and he was being interviewed during one of the marches. And the interviewer asked him, "Is this a movement or a moment?" And he said, "This is a move. This is a movement, not just a moment." And the interviewer asked him, "What makes you think that?" And he said, "Because my employees are demanding change. This is not just something that organizations are doing performatively. Now we know some are, but people in the organization, stakeholders, employees, people are demanding change and they want it now." So I think that is the thing that is so positive. That's the thing that I feel like is really positive that's come out of all of this.
Thank you. So, Ike, you talked about balance. You talked about the extra, sometimes expectations that are placed on you to navigate the spaces that you're in that are maybe different from your peers. Given that context, were there positive changes that you saw as it relates to your work, your education, your experiences?
Yeah, I would say, everything. I would echo everything Christina said. It's what I found to be unique and encouraging this year is really that people are making attempts to educate themselves about things that are outside of their norm, about the experiences of others, and I think that's encouraging because I think we won't be able to move forward as a society unless people do take that time and are intentional about it. And like Christina said, it's that people are calling for this. It's not it's not just, I mean, in some places it's institutional and it's not genuine, but I think what I've found in my lifetime has been encouraging. It's just that the people at most institutions are calling for a change, and to some degree there's support for that.
Thank you for that. So, Otis, you are a leading voice in medicine, and you talked a great deal about that you have to educate even beyond with your colleagues and beyond your colleagues. So, talk about hopeful evidence that you saw that there was an impact in the work that you do.
I was listening to Christina, and she's so right. The diversity in the movement in the last year has really been gratifying. But we have to spread that message in almost everything that we do at work. I use medicine as an example because that's what I do. I do medicine and I do some public health work. But I think that's true in business and elsewhere. We have to get people to understand. We have to connect with people. One only needs to look at what's going on politically right now in Texas or what just happened in Georgia to realize that there are still some people who need to be connected to, who need to understand what the problems are. I refuse to believe that a large portion of the American population is evil. Ignorant, yes, but not evil.
Mm, powerful. Interesting. So, based on that, the ideal of others being needing to be a part of the solution, right? But all of you talked about that, the need for there to be a wider umbrella of folks who are willing to be a part of this conversation. What are some strategic ways that other folks can continue to engage in this space? Ways that folks can, and anyone can answer this question, strategies or things that you've seen that have been effective from folks who are not a part of your community to move the needle forward.
I was just gonna say quickly, as a student, as a Black student in medical school, uh, I think one of the things that has always felt uh, taxing is that most of the change needed to come from our community, from we have a small medical school class here at Dartmouth, but there was basically 5 of us in the class, and uh, most of the change needed to be, kind of drive through us. There's that phrase that you need to be the change that you want to see, and that during your medical school education, and I'm sure during other professional degrees, is taxing, and it's a lot. It's a lot to try to maneuver and manage on top of um, all the other reasons why you actually got the degree or getting the degree in the first place. So for me, just seeing people do the work, right, ask the right questions, read about things, Google it, because it's been written about, has been powerful. And having others outside of the community bring ideas to the table, right? There's been movements in the past, and I think some of those strategies can be brought to the table when you're talking about Black communities or Asian American communities as well. And it's been powerful to see people kind of use those strategies and bring them to these conversations. But just being creative and not relying on the community that's being oppressed, if you will, to come up with their own solutions, I think is a place to start. Google it.
Google it. I like that. Thank you. I'll allow Otis to answer. Before that, though, I want to remind folks that you can engage in this conversation by asking questions. So if you want to put questions in the Q&A section, then those will be sent to me, and I'll make sure that I pose those to the panelists. Otis, you want to respond?
Yeah, I was going to say that we have to realize that we have those of us who've gone to college, especially those of us who are affiliated with Hopkins, are in a little cocoon. We have a little cocoon of privilege. There are some especially Black, but even poor whites, who don't have that protection and don't have that advantage. And our job is also to think about them as well, and think about how to help them, and think about how to communicate their plight. Before we communicate their plight, we need to even understand what their plight is. And so when I say reach out, I'm talking about reaching out even beyond the academic ivy walls.
Absolutely. That's profound. Yes, Christina.
Yeah, and I want to add, one of the things I'm really proud about my organization, we meet our clients where they are.
Mm.
There are some people that when you say the word race, they begin to sweat and tremble. We have other organizations coming to us saying, we want to kick the door down. We want to know what we have to do to become an anti-racist organization and lead it in our industry. And so it's extraordinary because we're constantly moving at the pace that the client is moving. And it's great because we don't really care where people are. We want to meet them wherever they are and help them take the next steps. One of the things that I've found fascinating this past year is the fact that because of the pandemic, we started working virtually. And before, we would be in our clients' offices or training space or whatever. And now we're doing work all over the country and some international work.
Hmm.
But we're going into companies in Portland, Oregon, and Washington State that are all white, that people grew up in all white families, all white neighborhoods, went to all white colleges, and now they're working in an all white company. And they are asking for help, saying, we know that demographically things are going to change. We are not prepared. We really don't know what to do. And so we have been guiding them and not doing the work for them. They absolutely have to do their own work, but we let them know that they're on the right track, or they need to move over a little to the left because they're going down the wrong, or they Googled the wrong thing. So it's really fascinating. It is really fascinating. And the thing that astonishes me is when they tell me things, or my team, things like, I didn't ever see, and I mean physically see, another person of color, another Black person until I got to college. And then we posed the question, at what age do Black and brown parents have to start teaching their children about race?
Mm.
And when they realize that at 5 and 6 years of age, we are teaching Black and brown children how to deal with the police and all this stuff. I mean, it's just, they're just in awe. They're just in awe. So it's just a really interesting time.
Wow, thank you for that. I always pick up on that till we get more questions from the audience about the being other. Who wants to share the first time they realized that they were different?
I was 5 years old. I distinctly remember it.
Mm.
I was in kindergarten, and I distinctly remember it because we had a new and we had a new teacher, and she knew my parents. And I went home and told my mother that Miss So and So was our substitute teacher today, and she knew them. And my mother didn't know who she was, and she said, "Can you describe her?" I said she was. What color was she? Is what my mother said, and I said she was coffee with cream and sugar in it. That's where I started realizing there was differences in color.
Wow.
I want to share, I went to an all Black elementary school up until 8th grade, went to an all white school. And it was really interesting because academically I was doing great and was not admitted the first go round, meaning when I applied. My grandmother thank goodness, who was the director of guidance counselors for DC Public Schools, said, oh, no, 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 we are not having this. We are not having this. And I actually felt academically inferior because I didn't get in, because I'm thinking, well, I must not have done as well. When I found out that my SAT scores or whatever it is to get into high school were better than some of the students there, because in my class there were 100, it was all girls school. There were 100 students, there were 4 Black students. My grades were better, my community stuff that all that was better than a lot of the people there. I was astonished. I was really astonished. And that was the first time that I felt like, this is not right. This is not right.
Thank you. We do have a question from the audience, so I'll give Ike, if you want, the first shot, or whoever wants to take the question. Given all of the social justice work around us, does your daily life feel different?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. I would say daily life doesn't actually feel any different. And maybe it's just the way I'm still looking at everything. What I have noticed is there are a lot of, a lot more of the Black Lives Matter signs when I'm walking down the streets and in Boston, when I'm here in Hanover, New Hampshire, and that feels good when you see it. But then I quickly revert back to my own protective instincts, and I think that as a human being is going to be hard to fold back on and to get rid of. But there have been things that have been outward signs of change that are a little bit more reassuring.
Thank you. Oh, that's so Christine.
No. No, it hasn't changed too much for me. I see a little bit more optimism, and I see more diverse groups of people talking about the issue. But at the same time, I get to see some of the hate or some of the negativity. And quite honestly, I think over the last 5 years, the negativity has felt that it was free to rear its ugly head. 5 years ago, people were ashamed. People had those thoughts, but they were ashamed to say them. Now they don't feel ashamed. They feel emboldened and free to say them.
Thank you. Christina, you want to answer it, or we can ask another question?
I think for me, because I'm doing this work, I have tunnel vision. My team and I, we just have we're on a mission. So we kind of block a lot of this stuff. We know what's going on out there. We know the ugliness is out there. We know it's out there. But we have to because we do it every day, we have to maintain our energy, our spiritual centeredness, so we can get through it, because we are having the deep, and I mean deep, conversations. I am telling CEOs almost at least twice a week about what has to change in their organization. And I'm just real quick, I was talking to a CEO not that long ago, and we had done all this work in his company, and he was really nervous about what we might find. And I would tell this story, so I'm not going to go into it now, but I would talk about finding the O-ring. The O-ring was this thing that caused the Space Shuttle Challenger to blow up. And I always tell organizations, I'm looking for your O-ring. I'm looking for the thing that's in your organization that's about to blow up that you don't even know. And so when I turned in my final report to this one CEO, I said to him, I found your O-ring. I had this conversation with him early on. I said, I found your O-ring. He said, really, what was it? I said, it is the number of Black women who are so angry about the fact that they have been mentoring young white men and women. Those people have catapulted up to the C-suite, and they've been in their positions for 10, 15, 20 years. They are not happy. They are not happy. And he said, thank you so much for being direct and honest with me. I'm thinking to myself, that's why you're paying me. And So he said, we will fix this. We will fix this and we will change this. That's what gives me hope. That's what makes me excited. And I have been in touch with them and they have fixed the problem. So that's why I have tunnel vision with this stuff, because it's like the starfish that gets thrown into the ocean. Yes, there are thousands of them on the beach, but we got this one. Now on to the next. Now we got this one. So
I love that. I'm going to use that O-ring. I'm going to tell you that right
absolutely.
now.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, I'll send you the whole script.
So we do have a couple more questions from the audience. I love these two questions. So I'll ask and anyone can answer. The first one is, can you share one impactful connection or conversation that you've had this year that you might not have had if the events of 2020 hadn't transpired? Love that question. And then the second question is, as an individual, are there actions that ally can take in this moment to support both yourself while supporting continuing change? Who wants to answer? You can answer either one.
Well, I'll start out with the first one. Talking to some of the more established professors and faculty members here at Hopkins, there were some who were totally shocked that I have had problems with police. Now, when I was almost 40 years old, I was an aide to the Surgeon General of the United States. I was thrown down to the ground in my driveway because I looked suspicious at my house, and I was handcuffed. And they did not want to believe it was my house. And even after they saw the address of that house on my driver's license, they would not apologize. And one of the cops was so bold, he started saying, you have a military ID in that wallet, and your rank, you seem too young for that rank.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, one of the problems, and I will say this to anybody who'll listen to it, is police forces have overwhelmingly accrued some people, not all, but some people who have authority problems. They need to have authority over people. And you saw that in Minnesota. You've seen that elsewhere. I got it in Montgomery County in 1996.
It's too many of those stories, right, to tell.
But the fact that there were a lot of what I will call good people at Johns Hopkins who couldn't believe that it could happen to a 40-year-old physician.
Thank you for sharing that. Who wants to answer the question about allies? And then we're going to wrap up our conversation. What can allies do? I already said Google it, so that's on our list. Are there other things, Christina? You've talked to allies, I'm sure, in this
Oh,
space.
yeah, absolutely. I really think, some of the signs that we've seen over and over and over again is silence is complicity. So people have to speak up. I don't care whether you're hearing a racist joke in the hallway or on Zoom before everybody else gets on, or it's like people have to speak up. We're all in a specific place and time for a reason. And we may think it might be because we're a doctor or we're running this department or whatever, and that's part of it. But I like what Otis said earlier. We have to go beyond just what it is that we're doing. So allies can show up and support and speak out. It is like watching somebody be harmed and not say anything about it. It is really important for people to speak up and then to continue to learn. We were talking earlier about the Tulsa massacre and how most people didn't learn this in school. If people were really educated about what has gone on in the history of this country, it is just shocking. It makes you move. It makes you think differently and act differently. So I just say the more people can read, there are hundreds of books out here, thousands of books out here now that talk about history, that talk about almost any area that people are interested in.
Thank you. We could continue this conversation, I know, but I've been told time. So thank you to my guests. I want to ask you to join us. You'll have an opportunity to talk one-on-one with us, following up and answering any questions. I will say this conversation has been an impactful start to, the dialogue series, and that more and more we want to engage with folks around identity and the impact that this past year has had on folks who wear certain faces and live in certain skin and have that two-ness, that double consciousness that can inform the way that we view and live in the world. You've been told tonight that this is not a moment, this is a movement. You've been told to Google it, to speak up and speak out, that you have to seek balance and opportunity. And sometimes that balance has additional consequences for some of us. Sort of to look beyond the ivory tower, that there are folks who don't enjoy our privilege, who need to be engaged in this conversation, who have experiences that are meaningful for moving the needle forward. That we're looking for the O-ring. I'll end on that. And that every institution, including our own, has an O-ring. And it's our responsibility, wherever we're placed at Hopkins, to address our O-ring. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a brief break. There is a link in the description that you received that you can join in the next 4 or 5 minutes. I think they said we'll be there at 8:10. So at 8:10, so 8 minutes from now, you have an opportunity to take a break. And there'll be a leading question as a part of that conversation. And that question will be, if daily life isn't significantly different, what do we do collectively to make more of a change, which will be reflected and felt daily? Thanks so much for joining us, Being Other. Have a good night. We'll see some of you in 7 minutes. Hopefully all of you in 7 minutes. Take care.